and you get better because you're more free and you're more honest and you're more open. But guess what? That's a muscle, and that muscle has to be used, it has to be employed, and it has to be trained in order for it to be effective in your life. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. So just like athletes have to consistently practice physical disciplines to grow, you need to practice spiritual disciplines. Welcome, everyone, to the Salty Pastor Podcast, a podcast designed to coach you up in your faith. You know what? Everyone needs some coaching. A coach is a person who believes in your potential, and someone needs to believe here on earth who believes in your spiritual potential. A coach is someone who understands the ins and outs of what actually works in athletic situations, right? But also spiritually. A coach is someone who says, hey, I understand the ins and out of what actually works in growing you spiritually. And oftentimes what we hear is nice, but it's not very effective. And so a coach understands what does and doesn't work. A spiritual coach, just like an earthly coach, is someone with a proven track record of winning. And one of the reasons why I do what I do is not because I think I'm all that. It's just that I was in the full-time ministry for almost 40 years. If you count part-time before that, is well over 40 years. And over those 40 years, you learn quite a bit about what's actually effective and what really makes a difference. And so, as Paul tells the Corinthians in the first chapter, I have decades and decades of experience and things that you can go back and look at and say, oh, wow, he actually produced fruit that lasted in the lives of other people. So I have a proven track record of winning when it comes to spiritual growth. Finally, a coach is a person who has convictions and love of the game, and that passion helps you become a better athlete. In the same way, a spiritual coach like me is one who loves this life and what God is doing in the lives of people. And I have a passion for this thing called life, the game of life and your soul. And my convictions have not changed in over 40 years. Now, I've learned and I've become much more wise about them, but ultimately, those convictions are never changing. So, when you allow someone to coach you, you're going to grow. You, I guarantee it, are going to grow, whether it be in sports, whether it be in business, and most importantly, in regards to your spiritual life. When you give someone the honor of challenging you to go to a higher standard or leveling up, they like to say in the business world. When you give someone the honor to do that in your life, I guarantee it, you will grow and you will level up, right? And this is the goal of Salty Pastor Podcast, is create an ecosystem that helps you level up, that encourages you and challenges you. Now, I just talked about earthly coaches, and athletics. And the reason I do that is because Paul did the same thing in the New Testament. He did the same thing as an analogy in multiple places about running the race, about boxing, about sometimes he used serving in the military. He uses all of these analogies that require athletic growth and athletic expertise, right? And one of the famous ones is 1 Corinthians chapter 9. So some of the things that he covers when he uses this analogy are very simple. Just like an athlete here in any sport. What are the three main requirements for you to be a great athlete and excel at any sport? Well, the first thing is physical development. Either you have to develop your strength or your agility. Doesn't matter what sport it is, it requires strength and agility. Some sports require more strength than agility. Other sports require more agility than strength. But it doesn't matter in the end. You have to develop your physical strength and your physical agility. The other thing, if you're going to be a great athlete and really excel is you have to develop your mind. You have to be able to mentally focus. There was a study out, this was probably about 25 years ago, and what they did with basketball is they took 50 people and they split them into two groups, okay? And the first group, 25 of them, were required to shoot 100 to 150 free throws every day for 30 days. So they did that. They would go, they'd shoot free throws. And so what do you think happened at the end of that 30 days? Well, their percentage of accuracy went up dramatically, right? And so they went from, these were people that were not basketball players, but they went up from, from 20 to 30%, all the way up into the 70 and 80 percentile, right? So they, just because of the muscle memory, just started to kick in, and they were able to do that. But this is what's fascinating about this study, is that the other 25 people, they said, what we want you to do is visualize shooting 100 free throws every single day, and we want you to visualize the basketball going in the hoop every single time. So these people didn't have any muscle memory. They didn't have any practice, and they went out and shot their free throws, and their percentages went up almost as high as those who practiced every day. The point of the study is that the idea of mental focus, visualizing your success and the culmination of all your training, has a huge impact. And so this launched what today is known as sports psychology. And so all your major sports teams have sports psychologists on staff that help athletes, right, focus on performing mentally at the top of their game. So you have physical development and you have mental focus, and we all know this. But the other thing too is that makes a huge difference in any athletic endeavor is consistency in your training. Whether you're consistently working on your mental focus or consistently working on your physical development, if you have no consistency, you're not going to see any results. So based on this fact, what does it look like in life when it comes to your spiritual life? Well, first and foremost, spiritual development is learning how to think for yourself. It's what I call critical thinking skills. And I can't iterate enough what a big deal this is. I can't talk about what a big deal this is, because in all of my years and in all of my work with people, I have always been astounded by how many people don't want to think for themselves. They just want to be told what to think and then go do it. I look back at my own life, and I look in my younger years how often I didn't want to think for myself. I didn't want to think through critical issues and learn and grow. I just wanted someone to tell me what to think, and then I was going to do that. It just made life so much simpler and easier. But if you want to grow spiritually, and if you want to know who you are and why you're walking the face of this earth, then you're going to have to develop critical thinking skills, which means you're going to have to teach and learn and develop your own capacity to think for yourself. If I were to boil what critical thinking skills are down to its core, it would be this. It is the ability, it is the capacity to know how to form accurate core beliefs. So critical thinking skills all have one goal, in my opinion, and that is to help you or develop within you the capacity to develop or form accurate core beliefs. And the reason why is this, because it's just not believing for the sake of believing that helps you grow, right? You have to believe things that are in line with reality. Because what happens if you're all in on believing, but you end up believing the wrong things, right? It doesn't do you any good. As a matter of fact, what it does is it just makes your life more messed up. So you can't believe just for the sake of believing. You have to believe that which reflects reality. And what I mean by that is, it affects it aligns with the reality of the fact that we're moral human beings. It aligns with the way your brain works and the things that your soul really needs. It aligns with the fact of whether or not human beings are also spiritual beings as well. So you gotta be able to develop core beliefs accurately. Okay. And that's what critical thinking skills are all about, is they give you the ability to do that. And throughout your life, what you're going to find is critical thinking skills are constantly aligning your core beliefs with ultimate truth and ultimate reality. Okay. I would go so far to say is that the power of belief is directly proportional to how accurately it reflects reality. So your beliefs are going to become more powerful and influential in your life the closer to the truth they actually are. So the second thing that I think is critical in spiritual growth and faith is that spiritual development is learning to practice spiritual disciplines. Just like consistency in training is critical for any athlete physically, guess what? It's the same way in your spiritual life. Just your spirit, you have to understand, is not a condition. It's not a status or state in which you exist, right? But your spiritual existence, your soul, is a muscle, okay? It's joints, it's ligaments and sinew. It's these things that must be developed and strengthened. You have to use a muscle or that muscle atrophies. In the same way, spiritually, you have to use your spiritual muscles. One of the most best analogies for this that I talk about in a book that I wrote about forgiveness is that forgiveness is a muscle as much as it is a decision. And what I mean by that is that you have to use it on a regular basis, because if you don't, you find it really difficult to forgive. You find difficult to move forward. You find difficult to be free from the thoughts and the judgments of other people. You find it difficult to be free from the emotional pain that other people cause in your life because of their insensitivity. You become easily offended, easily annoyed. Your expectations don't reflect reality, and you can become a bitter and cynical person. But when you start to learn how to forgive, your relationships get better and you get better because you're more free and you're more honest and you're more open. But guess what? That's a muscle. And that muscle has to be used, it has to be employed, and it has to be trained in order for it to be effective in your life. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. So just like athletes have to consistently practice spiritual discipline, physical disciplines to grow, you need to practice spiritual disciplines. Now, these don't have to be super complicated and massive and huge. They can be very, very simple. But you got to have some that you are practicing each and every day, right? Finally, it's really important, I think, is that there has to be a consistency in thinking for yourself and practicing that you make progress. So you can't just practice the disciplines and you can't just think for yourself on occasion and expect to grow spiritually. You got to do it regularly, right? So it's like training that muscle. You got to do it over and over again. So I believe this is exactly what the writer of Hebrews said, where he says the following: "For everyone who partakes only of milk is not," check this out, "not accustomed to the word of righteousness, for he is an infant. But solid food is for the mature, who because of practice have their senses trained to discern good and evil." And that's what I think is so critically important about the Salty Pastor. This is why I do what I do, and that is because I believe that most of what you're going to get in churches today in America is a diet of milk. You're not going to get solid food. And what's sad is, okay, if you want solid food, what you have to do is, you have to go to a college course, or you enroll in some in-depth Bible study course. And unfortunately, 80 to 90% of those are all designed on the academic model. And why is that a significant point? Because they bore you to death. They are so boring. Look, I understand. I'm way overeducated. I got my bachelor's in Bible and theology. I got my master's in education. Then I get a doctorate of ministry, okay? So I understand how they form courses, and I understand the incentives. And in order for your degrees to be accredited, they have to have a certain curriculum, and you have to have a certain body of knowledge. And it's all based on the philosophical tenets of modernism. And that basically means is an assumption that the more you know, the more you grow. But what we have found over and over again is what Paul says, and that is knowledge tends to just puff you up. The other aspect of doing in-depth study courses like this is that they all tend to be based on a specific systematic theology. And so you spend more of your time learning the systematic theology on how to understand the Bible as opposed to what the Bible's actually teaching. And so that's really a critical point. So I'm not trying to dog in-depth Bible studies, but I'm just trying to say you have to understand how they're structured and what they're going to produce. They're going to fill your head with a lot of knowledge. And that's not what I'm talking. It says, solid food is for the mature, who because of practice have their senses trained to discern good and evil. What's right and wrong? What's good for you spiritually? What's not good for you spiritually? And that's a question you have to ask for yourself because you're a critical thinker and you understand consistency and you want to align your core beliefs with an ultimate reality or truth, otherwise known as objective truth. So that's why I'm here, is I'm helping you to do that, not drill you down on some systematic theology and not try to drill your head filled with knowledge. I'm here to talk about what it means so that you can digest it yourself and then push you to make some decisions and challenge you to move forward in your faith. Because as I always say, what I think is really irrelevant. What you think is the most important thing when it comes to your faith. And that's one of the reasons why I'm talking about courage so much right now, is that none of this can happen if you don't think courageously. I'll tell you a little story. A number of years ago, a woman called me and made an appointment with me. And I didn't know who this woman was. And she came in, she sat down in my office. At this time, I was in the full-time ministry. So I was at the church, there in the office during my appointment times, because you can call, and schedule those. And I said, well, what can I do with you? And so she started to tell me her story. And she said, well, I'm a social scientist. And as many of you may know, social sciences is where predominantly the most progressive and liberal ideologies find their home. A lot of them come out of the social sciences. And she said that her peers had said that if you have questions about faith or you have questions about religion, they said, go and talk to Dr. Peake, because my reputation in the community was such that I'm the most fair, and I'm also familiar with the social sciences. So if you come and talk to me, I'm not going to sit there and just, yell at you like they're from the devil, I guess. I would just say, okay, well, let's talk about it. I understand them. I understand where they're effective and where they're not effective. And one of the things that I thought is really interesting is over the next few weeks and then over the next few months, because initially she came in about once a week and then it went to about once every other week, is that we'd sit for about an hour to an hour and a half, and we would just discuss her ideas and her perceptions and her worldview. And in my approach, I'm always like, well, before I can even I got to understand what her worldview is and where it comes from before I can offer any insightful, things that might challenge it or fill it out more. I just don't know. So I'd always ask questions. And what's interesting to me is the process she went to, because this isn't a story about me. I apologize if it sounds that way. This is a story about her, okay? And what I really respected as I watched her ask her questions is not what I said, but that she was willing to ask herself some really tough questions about what she believed and why she believed it. And then she was courageous, and I would say brutally honest in her answers of where she got her ideas on which she built her beliefs. And so this courageous and authentic introspection brought her to answers to some of the deepest questions of her life. And we took a break for about, 3 or 4 months. I gave her a book to read. She read it. She then said, hey, I want to come in, touch base with you. And over the course of about 2.5 to 3 years, she not only rediscovered her faith, but she did all the hard work herself, and she ended up getting baptized into Christ. Now, it wasn't because of what I said or what I did, other than I just created a safe environment. And this is so critical because so often, Christians struggle with creating safe environments for people to explore what they actually truly believe and think it through on their own. But when we do that, that's where God works the most. And so it took courage for her to do that. And that's what this is all about. Is this series right now on courage is all about you helping you discover how to do that. One of my favorite passages of Scripture, of course, in the Old Testament, I focus predominantly on the New Testament because we're under the New Covenant, and most people still have yet to understand the significance of what it means to be saved by Jesus Christ and redeemed by his blood and moved into the new kingdom. I mean, those are basic concepts, but because predominantly in America, people get milk, they often don't get meat, and so they don't understand the implications of those 3 basic statements. But that's okay, because I'm retired and I'm still wrestling and digging and chewing into what those 3 things mean. And I find and discover new things every single day about their implications. They are powerful, powerful truths. But in the Old Testament, some of the passages of scriptures that I appreciate most is Psalms 139, because it talks about the omniscience of God, the sovereignty of God. In the first 12 verses, kind of really dig into that. But what I want to do is, in some of these are famous verses or may be familiar to do. I want to start with verse 13 of chapter 139 and kind of dig into this a little bit about courage and why creating a safe place is necessary for you to become a critical thinker for yourself. And look at what he says in verse 13. He goes, "You, O Lord, formed my inward parts. You wove me in my mother's womb. I will give thanks to thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, and my soul knows it very well." So the first thing, notice what he does here, and this is a beautiful thing, is that people who want to think for themselves reject the Gnostic binary notion that flesh and spirit are completely divided. They're not. Jesus came in the flesh for a reason. He rose in the flesh from the dead for a reason. And when you get to the end, it says that there will be a new heaven and earth with new bodies. And so we're not to divide these two like the Gnostics did. And the reason they did this is because of Plato's idealism, where he kind of split physical and spiritual to the point where the breach couldn't cover. And also, by the way, the first 5 major heresies in the church in the first 300 years all revolved around this idea of Gnostic splitting of the spirit in the flesh, because they all said that Jesus couldn't be completely spiritual and completely fleshly at the same time. And so isn't it interesting how all this revolves? And yet David talks about this almost 1,000 years before Christ was born. He says, look, my soul knows that my flesh is fearfully and wonderfully made. He says, my physical frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret, skillfully wrought in the depths of the earth. Your eyes have seen my unformed substance, and in your book they were all written. The days that were ordained for me, when as yet there was not one of them. So he said, you knew me, you knew what was going to happen. So he's talking about God's omniscience about the existence of human beings. And then he goes on to say, how precious also are your thoughts to me, O God. How vast is the sum of them. If I should count them, they would outnumber the sand. And when I awake, I am still with you. So notice what he's saying is, God, I can't even fathom how many thoughts that you have and all of your ideas. Now, I'm getting to a point about courageous thinking and where it comes from. Look at verse 19. It goes, Oh, that you would slay the wicked God. Depart from me, therefore, men of bloodshed, for you speak against God wickedly, and thine enemies take thy name in vain. Do I not hate those who hate thee, O Lord? And do not I loathe those who rise up against thee? I hate them with the utmost hatred. They have become my enemies as well. So what he's saying is, man, in today's world, what we should say is we should hate the devil. We should hate what the devil does. And we should hate those who are completely employed in his agenda. We should hate that and stand against it, okay? And then look at what he says this. This is where real courage is birthed. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there be any hurtful way in me, and lead me in the everlasting way. That's where real courage begins. Do you have the courage? This is my challenge for you today. Do you have the courage to spend some time in authentic, absolutely authentic introspection about who you are? Are you willing to say to God, search me and know my heart? Try me. The word try me basically means expose it, measure it, show me where I'm off. Try me, know my anxious thoughts, tell me, expose to me my fears and my anxieties and what they're linked to and where they come from. Please reveal those things to me, God. So my challenge for you is simply this. Do you have the courage to spend some time in authentic, really authentic introspection? Or are you afraid of what you might find there? This is the beginning of critical thinking, forming core beliefs, and intentionally practicing the spiritual disciplines. Now, why is it so important? Why is this challenge difficult? Well, the first thing I want to do is I want to dispel the fear of what you might find. Oftentimes, people don't want to think introspectively because they're afraid of what they might find. But the reality is this, my friend, we are all flawed. I was just talking to a friend of mine last week. He's a pastor in the Midwest. And he just said, you know, what's interesting is that we all have a dark side. Yes, we do. Every single one of us. The New Testament teaches ultimately that you're never free of your dark side until you enter into heaven and are given that new heavenly dwelling, that new body. Therefore, if this is true, if we all have a dark side and if we all are flawed, then why is it that Jesus has redeemed us and set us free from what that dark side can do to us? He set us free from that and loves us and puts his Holy Spirit within us, even though it's still there, right? The question is, can you think about these things in your life and consider them authentically and honestly without fear, without a sense of guilt or shame? You remember that what Satan does is take these things and say, well, you should feel guilty about them because you're not perfect. You know, you should feel ashamed of this because you're still carrying this around. But wait a second. Jesus knows that I'm still broken. He knows that I still have a dark side, and yet his Holy Spirit still dwells within me. And so shouldn't I be able to know that Jesus loves me and creates a safe environment for me to actually think about and explore these things without guilt, without fear, without shame? Because it's only when I can honestly think about them and expose them and ask Jesus, hey, see if there is any anxious way in me. Know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any painful way in me. What am I doing that creates more pain in my life right now? You see, when you ask those questions in the safety of redemption, you can be free from the fear of what you might discover. because Jesus already knows there. There's no question about that. So the question then becomes is how can I explore these things? This is where you will find the beginning of a courageous mindset in your life. When you have the freedom to authentically think deeply about who you really are and be okay with it. That's where it starts. So we're going to leave it there. And then on Thursday, we're going to pick up with some more stories and dig into more about the courageous mindset and how it impacts all different areas of your life. But if you're watching on the YouTube channel, I'm going to hold this up. If you're listening, most of you listen online, through podcasts, is that how to read and understand the Bible. I actually received this in a box today as I am recording this podcast on the 3rd of June, 2025. So I'm so excited about this, and they're available now on Amazon. They are paperback copies, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to get these autographed and sent out to all of my donors as just a big, giant thank you. Now, if you'd be so kind to go over to our YouTube channel, The Salty Pastor, and like and subscribe. Like and subscribe. Also, go to our website, thesaltypastor.com, and you can sign up for a Monday morning inspirational email to fire you up for the week. And you won't want to miss out on that. So until then, see you on Thursday. Talk to you on Thursday. And remember, what you believe is one of the most important things about you.